A Mafia boss confronted Sinatra backstage. Frank's response was pure ice. The dressing room at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach still smelled of cigarette smoke and expensive cologne when the knock came. It wasn't the polite tap of a stagehand or the enthusiastic rapping of an admirer hoping for an autograph. This was 3 solid, measured knocks that carried the unmistakable weight of authority. The kind of knock that said the person on the other side didn't ask permission, they announced their arrival. Frank Sinatra, still in his tuxedo from the show, his bow tie loosened and hanging around his neck, looked up from the Jack Daniels he'd been pouring. It was January 1961, and Frank was at the absolute peak of his power. His Rat Pack shows were selling out everywhere. His movies were making money. His recordings were dominating the charts. He'd just helped get John F. Kennedy elected president, and the whole world knew it. Frank Sinatra was untouchable. Or so everyone thought. "Come in," Frank called, his voice carrying that particular edge it got when he sensed something was off. He'd been in show business long enough to develop instincts about danger, and those instincts were screaming warnings now. The door opened, and 3 men walked in. The first 2 were muscle, thick-necked, dead-eyed men in expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the fact that they were hired to break things. But it was the 3rd man who commanded attention. Santo Trafficante Jr. walked into the room with the unhurried confidence of a man who owned half of Florida and controlled most of the rest. Trafficante was one of the most powerful mafia bosses in America. He ran Havana before Castro kicked everyone out. He controlled the Bolita lottery in Tampa and had interests in casinos from Miami to Las Vegas. He was connected to families in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. When Trafficante wanted something, he usually got it, and he'd apparently decided he wanted something from Frank Sinatra. "Mr. Sinatra," said Trafficante, his voice smooth as silk, but with something harder underneath. "Beautiful show tonight, really beautiful. You're an artist, a true artist." Frank stayed seated, which in itself was a calculated choice. Standing would have been deferential. Staying seated while Trafficante stood was a power play, and everyone in the room recognized it. "Thanks," Frank said flatly, not offering his hand, not smiling, not doing any of the performance that usually accompanied his interactions with powerful people. "You want an autograph? I'm a little busy right now." One of the muscle guys shifted forward, but Trafficante raised a hand, a small gesture that froze the man in place. The boss smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny guy, I like that. You got that sense of humor, that timing. That's why people love you." Trafficante moved further into the room, uninvited, and gestured to one of the chairs. "You mind?" "I mind," Frank said evenly. "Like I said, I'm busy. So if you got something to say it, and then get the fuck out of my dressing room." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. The 2 muscle guys looked at each other, clearly not used to hearing anyone talk to their boss like that. Trafficante's smile remained fixed, but something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "You got balls, Frank. I respect that. But you should understand something. I didn't come here to ask for favors. I came here to collect on one." "I don't owe you any favors." "No? That's interesting, because I seem to remember a situation a few years back. You needed some help with a venue in Havana. You needed some doors to open in Vegas. You needed, how should I put this, certain people to look the other way while you did certain business." Trafficante's voice remained pleasant, conversational, like he was discussing the weather. "My friends helped with that. I helped with that." Frank's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what Trafficante was referring to. In the late 50s, when Frank was rebuilding his career after the wilderness years, he'd accepted help from people who had the power to make things happen. That help had come with implicit strings attached, strings that Frank had told himself he could manage, that he could control. He'd been wrong. "I sang at some weddings, I showed up at some parties, I did what I was asked to do. We're square. Are we? Trafficante pulled out a chair and sat down, ignoring Frank's earlier objection. See, Frank, the thing about favors in our world, they're not transactions, they're investments. And right now, I need to see some return on my investment. What do you want? Trafficante leaned back, getting comfortable, clearly enjoying having Frank's full attention. I want you to use your influence with your friend, Jack, the president. I want you to tell him that this whole Cuba situation, the attempts to get rid of Castro, the CIA operations, that needs to include people like me, people who had interests there, people who want their businesses back. Frank felt his blood turn to ice. This was exactly the nightmare scenario he'd been dreading since the election. He'd campaigned for Kennedy. He'd raised money, organized fundraisers, used every connection he had to help get JFK elected. And now someone wanted to use that connection for their own purposes. I don't have that kind of influence with the president, Frank said, which was half true. He'd had access during the campaign, but things had cooled since the inauguration. Bobby Kennedy, the president's brother and newly appointed attorney general, actively despised Frank and everything he represented. The administration was already putting distance between itself and Frank Sinatra. Don't bullshit me, Frank. Trafficante's voice hardened. I know you got access. I know you got his ear. You're going to set up a meeting. You're going to make the introduction. And you're going to make sure Jack understands that there are people who helped him get elected, and those people expect certain considerations. No. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. One of the muscle guys actually took a step forward, his hand moving towards his jacket, but Trafficante stopped him again with another small gesture. No, Trafficante repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You're telling me no? That's right, I'm telling you no. Frank stood now, and despite being smaller than everyone else in the room, despite being unarmed and outnumbered, he radiated a kind of controlled fury that made even the muscle guys hesitate. You're making a mistake, Frank. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Frank moved closer to Trafficante, getting right in his personal space, his ice-blue eyes locked on the mobsters. You think you can intimidate me? You think I'm scared of you? I've been dealing with guys like you my whole life, guys who think muscle and money make them untouchable. But here's the thing, you touch me, you got a problem, a big problem, bigger than you want to deal with. Is that right? Trafficante's voice was soft but deadly. And what kind of problem would that be? The kind where every newspaper in America writes about how a famous entertainer was threatened by organized crime. The kind where the FBI, who's already watching your ass, suddenly has a very public reason to make your life hell. The kind where every cop and fed in Florida starts looking real hard at your operations. Frank's smile was cold as winter. You're powerful, Santo, but you're not more powerful than publicity. And if anything happens to me, if I have an accident, if I mysteriously disappear, every news outlet in the world will know you want that heat.
Country is going to be asking questions. Questions about who I was talking to. Questions about who had motive. You're bluffing. Try me. Frank's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every word cut like a knife. Go ahead, put your hands on me, threaten me again, see what happens, because I promise you, whatever you think you'll gain by pushing me around, it won't be worth what you'll lose. The two men stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills that had nothing to do with physical strength and everything to do with who would blink first. Frank's heart was hammering in his chest, his hands were sweating, but he didn't show it, couldn't show it, because the moment he showed fear, the moment he blinked, he'd lose everything. Trafficante stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Frank's. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, incredibly, Trafficante smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite mask he'd been wearing. You got bigger balls than I gave you credit for, Frank. Most people in your position would have folded by now, would have made promises they had no intention of keeping just to get me out of the room. He straightened his jacket. But I respect that, even if I think you're being stupid. I've been called worse. I bet you have. Trafficante moved toward the door, his muscle falling behind him. At the threshold, he turned back. This isn't over, Frank. You should understand that. This situation with Kennedy, with Cuba, it's bigger than you and me. And whether you help or not, it's gonna move forward. The only question is whether you're smart enough to be on the right side of it. I'll take my chances. Will you? Trafficante's expression hardened. You think you're untouchable because you're famous, because you got friends in high places. But fame is fickle, Frank. Friends are unreliable. And the people you're refusing to help, we don't forget, we don't forgive. And sooner or later, everyone pays their debts. Get out of my dressing room. Trafficante nodded, as if Frank had just confirmed something he'd suspected. Enjoy the rest of your stay in Miami, Mr. Sinatra. It's a beautiful city, but it can be dangerous for people who don't understand how things work here. Then he was gone, his men following, the door closing behind them with a soft click that somehow felt more ominous than if they'd slammed it. Frank stood there for a moment, his body still vibrating with adrenaline, his mind racing through everything that had just happened. Then his knees went weak, and he sat down hard in his chair, his hands shaking as he reached for his drink. Jesus Christ, he muttered to himself, downing the whiskey in one gulp and immediately pouring another. What Frank didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that his confrontation with Trafficante was about to have consequences that would ripple through his life for years to come. The Kennedy administration, already uncomfortable with Frank's mob connections, would soon cut him off completely. Plans for the president to stay at Frank's Palm Springs compound would be canceled at the last minute, with JFK staying at Bing Crosby's house instead, a humiliation that Frank would never fully get over. Bobby Kennedy's Justice Department would intensify its scrutiny of Frank's business dealings, looking for any excuse to make his life difficult. But all that was in the future. In that moment, alone in his dressing room, Frank was dealing with the immediate aftermath of having stood up to one of the most dangerous men in America. There was a knock at the door, softer this time, familiar. "Frank, you okay in there?" It was Jilly Rizzo, Frank's closest friend and bodyguard, the one person Frank trusted completely. Frank took a breath, steadied himself, and called out, "Yeah, come in." Jilly entered, took one look at Frank's face, and immediately understood something had happened. Who was that? Those three guys who just left? One of the stagehands said they walked in here like they owned the place. Santo Trafficante. Jesus Christ, Frank. Jilly nearly dropped his glass. What? What did he want? What they always want. He wanted me to use my connections with Kennedy, wanted me to set up meetings, make introductions, help them get their hooks into the administration. And what did you tell him? I told him to go fuck himself. Jilly nearly dropped his glass. What? You heard me. I told him no. I told him to get out of my dressing room. I told him I don't give a shit who he is or what he thinks I owe him. Frank lit a cigarette, his hand still not quite steady. I wasn't gonna do it, Jilly. I wasn't gonna help them use the President of the United States for their criminal enterprises. You understand what you just did, Frank. You understand who you just told to fuck off? I understand perfectly. Frank took a long drag on his cigarette, and I'd do it again. These guys, they think they own everybody. They think fear and money can buy anyone. Well, they can't buy me. Not anymore. Not for this. Jilly sat down, looking at Frank with a mixture of admiration and terror. This is going to have consequences. You know that, right? Trafficante doesn't make threats he doesn't follow through on. Let him try. I meant what I said. He touches me, he's got bigger problems than he can handle. The publicity alone would destroy him. Maybe he figures out a way to hurt you without it being obvious. These guys are creative, Frank. They know how to make life difficult without leaving fingerprints. Frank knew Jilly was right, but in that moment, he didn't care. For once in his complicated relationship with organized crime, a relationship that helped his career, but had also compromised him in ways he was only beginning to understand, Frank had drawn a line. He'd said no. He'd stood up to someone everyone said couldn't be stood up to. You think I should have said yes? You think I should have agreed to pimp out the president? I think you did the only thing Frank Sinatra could do, the only thing that lets you look at yourself in the mirror. But I also think we need to be careful, really careful, because this isn't over. Jilly was right about that. The confrontation with Trafficante was just the beginning of what would become the most difficult period of Frank's life. Within months, Frank's relationship with the Kennedy administration would collapse completely. The cancellation of the president's stay at Frank's Palm Springs compound was a public humiliation that made headlines. Frank, who had worked so hard to be accepted by political power, who'd worked tirelessly for Kennedy, was being frozen out. And while he never had proof, Frank suspected that Santo Trafficante had something to do with it. Not directly. Trafficante wouldn't need to say anything directly to Bobby Kennedy, but word traveled in those circles. People talked, and the message would have been clear. Frank Sinatra wasn't reliable. Frank Sinatra couldn't be controlled. Frank Sinatra was a liability.
The irony was devastating. Frank had refused to help criminals use his connection to the president, and his reward was to have that connection severed anyway. He tried to do the right thing, and it had cost him the political acceptance he'd craved. But there was another side to the story, one that took years to fully emerge. Frank's refusal to be intimidated, his willingness to tell Santo Trafficante to go to hell, earned him respect in unexpected quarters. Other entertainers, people who'd been pressured by organized crime for years, heard the story. These things always leaked, always spread, and took courage from it. Frank Sinatra had stood up to the mob. If he could do it, maybe they could too. More importantly, Frank had preserved his self-respect. In a life full of compromises and questionable decisions, in a career that had required him to make deals with all kinds of unsavory characters, Frank had found a line he wouldn't cross. He wouldn't use the President of the United States as a tool for criminals. He wouldn't betray that fundamental principle, no matter what it cost him. Dean Martin found Frank in the bar at the Fontainebleau the night after the Trafficante confrontation. Frank was on his fourth drink, sitting alone in a corner booth, radiating a "don't fuck with me" energy that had kept everyone else at a distance. Dean slid into the booth without asking, signaled the waiter for his usual, and studied his friend for a long moment. "Heard you had a visitor last night," Dean said finally. "Word travels fast." "It always does, especially when that visitor is Santo Trafficante and the meeting doesn't go well." Frank looked at Dean, his oldest friend, the one person who understood him better than anyone. "He wanted me to be his errand boy, to use Jack to help them get their Cuba operations back. And you told him no?" "And I told him to fuck off." Dean's drink arrived. He took a sip, his expression unreadable. "That was either the bravest thing you've ever done or the stupidest. I'm still trying to figure out which. Does it matter?" "Maybe not," Dean leaned back. "You know what's going to happen now, right? Kennedy's people are going to hear about this. They're going to panic. They're going to put even more distance between you and the administration." "I know. And Trafficante, he's not going to forget this. He's going to find ways to make your life difficult." "I know that too." "So why'd you do it, Frank? Why not just tell him you'd try, string him along, and then not deliver? You could have bought yourself time, bought yourself space. Instead, you went nuclear." Frank finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. "Because I'm tired, Dino. I'm tired of making compromises. I'm tired of owing people favors. I'm tired of having to watch what I say and who I talk to and who I'm seen with. For once, just once, I wanted to do the right thing without calculating the cost." "And how's that working out for you?" "I'll let you know." Frank looked at his friend. "You think I'm an idiot?" "I think you're Frank Sinatra, which means you're brilliant and self-destructive in equal measure. Always have been." Dean's smile was gentle. "But for what it's worth, I'm proud of you.
Not everyone would have had the balls to tell Santo Trafficante to go fuck himself. Most people would have caved. Most people are smarter than me. Maybe, but they're not braver, and they're not you. Dean raised his glass. To Frank Sinatra, the only man in America dumb enough to pick a fight with the mob and the president in the same week. Despite everything, Frank smiled. When you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid. It is pretty stupid, but it's also pretty admirable. Dean clinked his glass against Frank's empty one. You did the right thing, Pally, even if it costs you. The costs did come, gradually and from multiple directions. The Kennedy administration's freeze-out was painful and public. Frank had to watch as Peter Lawford, his Rat Pack brother, who was also JFK's brother-in-law, got caught in the middle and eventually had to choose the Kennedy family over Frank. That betrayal, though Peter was in an impossible position, would end their friendship permanently. Frank's business dealings came under increased scrutiny. The IRS, almost certainly at Bobby Kennedy's direction, launched audits of his finances. His casino interests in Nevada faced regulatory challenges. Suddenly, deals that had once gone through smoothly were hitting unexpected obstacles. And then there were the subtle things, the ways organized crime could make life difficult without doing anything overtly criminal. Venues suddenly had booking conflicts. Musicians he'd worked with for years were unavailable. Union problems materialized out of nowhere. Nothing that could be directly traced back to Trafficante, but Frank knew. Everyone knew. But Frank didn't bend, didn't apologize, didn't try to make nice with either the Kennedys or the mob figures he'd offended. If anything, his refusal to back down made him more determined to succeed on his own terms. He threw himself into his work with manic intensity. He recorded some of his best albums in this period, Ring-a-Ding-Ding, Sinatra and Strings, I Remember Tommy, as if trying to prove that he didn't need political connections or mob backing to be Frank Sinatra. His talent was enough. His work ethic was enough. He was enough. The Rat Pack shows continued. The movies kept getting made. Frank Sinatra, despite all the powerful people who wanted to make his life difficult, remained Frank Sinatra, brilliant, defiant, impossible to ignore. Years later, long after Jack Kennedy was dead and Santo Trafficante had faded from prominence, a reporter asked Frank about that period of his life, about the falling out with the Kennedys and the rumored confrontation with organized crime figures. Frank, old now but still sharp, considered the question carefully. I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I made compromises I'm not proud of. But there were also times when I stood up for what I believed in, even if it cost me. That's all anyone can do. Try to get the balance right. Do you regret any of it? The political involvement, the relationships with questionable characters? I regret plenty, but I don't regret standing my ground when it mattered. I don't regret telling powerful people they couldn't use me for things that were wrong. Frank's ice blue eyes, dimmed by age but still penetrating, locked on the reporter. You want to know what I learned? Power doesn't come from who you know or who's afraid of you. Real power comes from knowing who you are and refusing to be something else, no matter what anyone offers you or threatens you with. Is it true you once told a major crime figure to, and I'm quoting the rumor here, to get the fuck out of your dressing room? Frank smiled, that dangerous smile that had charmed and terrified people for decades. I don't comment on rumors, but I'll say this. There were times in my life when people thought they owned me, thought they could tell me what to do, how to act, who to help. And there were times when I had to remind those people that Frank Sinatra doesn't take orders from anyone. Even when it was dangerous?
Especially when it was dangerous. That's when it mattered most. The story of Frank's confrontation with Santo Trafficante became one of those Hollywood legends that exists in the space between fact and myth. Different versions circulated. Some said Frank had pulled a gun. Some said Trafficante had made explicit threats. Some said the whole thing was exaggerated, just another example of Sinatra's legendary temper and ego. But the people who were there, Jilly Rizzo, who'd heard Frank's account immediately after it happened, and later Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and others who Frank confided in, knew the truth. Frank had stood up to one of the most dangerous men in America, had told him no, had refused to be intimidated or controlled. And in doing so, Frank had paid a price. His relationship with political power never recovered. His mob connections became liabilities rather than assets. The golden moment when Frank Sinatra stood at the intersection of entertainment, politics, and street power, that moment ended in a Miami dressing room in January 1961. But Frank also gained something: self-respect. The knowledge that when it truly mattered, when the stakes were highest, he'd done the right thing, regardless of cost. In the decades that followed, as Frank's legend grew and his career had its ups and downs, that moment remained a touchstone, proof that beneath all the swagger and ego and public persona, there was a core of steel that couldn't be bent or broken. Sammy Davis Jr., who worshipped Frank and understood him as well as anyone, once said, "People think Frank was all about the image, about the power and the fame and the cool. But the thing about Frank that most people missed, he had principles, real principles. And when those principles were tested, when someone tried to make him compromise on something that really mattered, Frank would draw a line, and you did not want to be the person who crossed that line." Dean Martin, characteristically more succinct, put it this way: "Frank told Santo Trafficante to go fuck himself. How many people can say that? How many people would have had the balls?" Santo Trafficante Jr. died in 1987, having never been successfully prosecuted for any of his alleged crimes. He died peacefully in his sleep, which was more than most people in his line of work could hope for. Frank Sinatra died in 1998 at age 82, having lived long enough to see his reputation rehabilitated, his music recognized as the standard against which all other popular singers were measured, and his place in American cultural history secured. The two men never spoke again after that night in Miami, never crossed paths at an event or a venue. It was as if, having established the boundaries of their relationship in that confrontation, there was nothing more to say. But the story of their confrontation lived on, passed down through generations of entertainers and chroniclers of mid-century American life. It became a parable about standing up to power, about refusing to be intimidated, about the cost and value of principle. Because that's what it was, really, a story about principle, about a moment when Frank Sinatra, for all his flaws and complications and questionable decisions, stood at a crossroads and chose the harder path, chose integrity over expedience, chose self-respect over self-preservation. The response was pure ice, not because Frank was cold, but because he was clear. Clear about who he was, clear about what he wouldn't do, clear about the line that couldn't be crossed, no matter who was doing the crossing. That clarity, that absolute certainty in the moment, is what made Frank's response legendary. Not the words he used or the threats he made, but the unwavering conviction that he would not be moved, would not be controlled, would not betray his principles no matter what Santo Trafficante or anyone else threatened. In a life full of compromises and complications, in a career that had required Frank to navigate between legitimate business and street power, between art and commerce, between his public image and his private self, that moment stood out as a beacon of clarity. Frank Sinatra, for all his faults, had looked one of the most dangerous men in America in the eye and said no. And nothing, not career concerns, not fear, not calculation of consequences, nothing could move him from that position. That was the ice everyone remembered. Not coldness, but absolute zero certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from finally, definitively knowing exactly where you stand. Frank Sinatra stood his ground, and the world would remember.